All right, hi there, welcome back. This is going to be chapter 3. This will be an extraordinarily short chapter or lecture. This is one world, many actors. Really, the only thing they talk about here, and this is a very, very accessible chapter. I love the way that she writes this, but it's not about international relations per se. It's about how we analyze and research. So I'm going to leave most of this up to you. Um, but I do want to just sort of mention the four basic units of analysis, right? We have the system level. Um, how does the global system work? How does the global economic system work? How do things like alliance systems work? Then you have the state level, right? This is the normal level that we study things in international relations. And usually, at least in the analytic side of things, it's called a dyadic relationships, right? How does one state respond to other states in this just one-on-one um, kind of way? That one's pretty self-explanatory. Then we have the group level. So this is sort of what I study, but I study comparative politics, right? So this would be like what I study is ethnic conflict, right? And so how are ethnic groups participating against each other? How does the corporate competition work inside of a nation? These sorts of things, right? And then finally, you have the individual level, right? So, how are individuals voting? How does I don't know, ideas about inflation affect someone's likelihood of voting right or left on foreign policy? It's kind of nitty gritty, and that's why we don't really use it much in IR. IR is more about sort of the bigger picture. Um, let's see. It's really you have to understand what level we're examining so that you can keep things conceptually clear, but also so that you can gather the appropriate data, right? Um, the author makes the claim that the world system and our discipline in general should move beyond the state centric approach. And while there's something to be said about that, I would actually kind of push back a little bit and say, maybe in the 90s and 2000s, there might have been some possibility of that happening. But we're actually moving back toward a very state-centric approach, right? Like we have this rise of nationalism and anti-immigrant sentiment and policy, right? So things are becoming more about that sort of that cultural piece of what a state is, a nation state, like we talked about in chapter 1. You're also seeing the return of sort of state-driven investment and protectionism and industrialization and tariffs, right? So we're going back into our shells economically, and this is not just the U.S. This is all across the planet, really. Protectionism is rising, right? We're seeing the decline of alliances and the return of a more sort of anarchic America first approach, right? So alliances are breaking down, the value of them is breaking down, the trust in them is breaking down, and so again, we're headed back toward more like a our state needs to protect itself kind of thing. And then finally, the rise of autocracy, right? And the alignment of a sort of a single vision of policy for a long time. Francis Fukuyama wrote this famous book that he's been criticized for a long time for. He's a Stanford professor who said, democracy is taking over and it will be called the end of history. It'll be the only type of government on the planet. Well, that is bullshit, right? And we're seeing like a complete flip flop where now democracies are sort of strangling and autocracies are rising out of their ashes. And autocrats have also learned a lot of things by looking back at history and saying, okay, well, here's some things that they screwed up, and here's some things where they really took hold of even more power. And so you're seeing that, right? All right, that's all I got for this one. So thanks for being here. Have a great day.